On day 17, we will drive into Massachusetts, see the Berkshires, drive to several historical sites. We'll leave Albany, go over to Edith Wharton's house, then go to Emily Dickinson's house, see Old Sturbridge, and then spend the night at the hotel in Sturbridge. We'll leave the hotel in Albany, New York, relatively early so that we can get started on this trip.
Slight right to stay on New York 66 South.
Soon we're driving into Massachusetts, and we'll be here for several more days. This western part of Massachusetts is called the Berkshires, and we'll be driving through it for the rest of the day.
Turn right.
First up is the Mount, Edith Wharton's home. We'll be arriving at the stables and then go up to the main house where we'll park and look around. We'll be on a tour. As we drive to the house, we'll be driving through a forested area and has many art exhibits in it. We'll look at them more detail when we leave. This house is called The Mount and was built by Edith Wharton. Our guide will be Ann Shea. She's the house
over 40
director.
works in 40 years, and there's something there for everyone. Poetry, plays, short stories, ghost stories, travelogues, essays, war reporting, war novels, all kinds of things. But very few people know that her first published book, published in 1897, was a book on architecture and interior design. At the time, Edith is living in Newport, doesn't really approve of the society there, doesn't like the climate, comes here to Lenox, 1901, buys the property, and is very involved in planning every detail of the house, according to the principles of decoration of houses. Stairs going through the window over there, that's not usually done. Doesn't bother her. The windows have to line up, the stairs had to be there, that's all right. You'll hear me say symmetry over and over as we go through. So is the house symmetrical? No, there's a whole wing over there that doesn't fit. That's the service wing, you're supposed to ignore it. It did bother her, and she considered building another wing on that side, but it didn't work. So she hopes you'll just ignore it.
We'll enter the house on the first floor through the entrance hall.
Okay, very unusual entry hall, because in that direction, there's just a cloakroom and then rock. She uses mirrors again very effectively. You arrive, you check yourself, and it visually extends the space so you're not hit with a dead end. Behind that wall was the furnace room. The mirrored windows to keep the symmetry, reflect light, nature. You don't want to look in the furnace room. Back there, kitchens, laundry, storage. So this is all that's left. And she turns it into a grotto, a decorative cave. That usually was a destination on an estate, not part of the house. But here it works very well. Now, plaster panels to represent water dripping down the mossy wall. The barrel ceiling gives you the echo. The fountain is original and out of nature by McMoney's. Would have been bubbling water. And as I said, this is a summer house. So you've come a long way.
And now it's time to head up to the second floor, which is actually the main floor.
So now you're in the house, and we say that this is where Edith would greet her guests. Now, you wouldn't spend a lot of time in here, but it's the main hallway. It provides access to all of the other rooms. And it's very important to her that you don't have to weave your way through rooms to get to another room, which was often the case in Victorian houses. The rooms all connect, but each one can be entered from the hall. And in this space especially, I think you see what's so important to her. Having the main floor on the second floor, you get better views, better air, light circulation. It works very well. And everything has to be symmetrical. You see the mirror now? The drawing fireplace is on the other side of the wall. And that's why I can't think you wouldn't want two doors anyway. It works well to reflect light, nature, and angles. And unusual to have terrazzo flooring in a New England house, but she spent a lot of time in Italy. Really loved it there. Wrote several books on Italian villas and their gardens. This is local marble and an Italian marble for the base. She loved her little dogs. She usually had 5 or 6 or more. And this is good flooring if you have 5 or 6. And we're so glad they came back to the mountains. At the end of her life in France, she had 2 beautiful homes. One outside of Paris, one on the French Riviera, divided her time between the 2. Each of those houses had libraries with much more capacity than this. She owned at least 5,000 books, had no children.
Her husband was Edward Robbins, also called Teddy. And here's some pictures of her at various ages, always with her dogs. And now this is the drawing room.
But the house is very light and airy in general, you know. Now, originally there were 3 tapestries, one in the wall.
She loved her little dogs and had beds made for them. In the dining room, she had a very small table, round so that they could talk a lot. The bedroom floor is the top floor, and this is where they lived. Here are some of her many works that she did while writing. It took about 10 servants to run this house, and here's a listing of the pecking order. The last room that we look at is going to be the kitchen. And then after we look here, we're going to head out through the gift shop and look around the grounds a little bit before heading out. On the way driving out, we're going to look at some of those art installations we talked about. And now it's time to head on over to a new place. We'll be heading to Amherst next. We'll be continuing to drive through the Berkshires as we go. Amherst is a college town, and that's quite fitting since Emily Dickenson explored education and ways to better her life all throughout her life. We'll go down there and I'll take some pictures maybe if I can stop a little. If I can't, then we may come back and park, or I may try and park there for a minute or two.
Himalayan cuisine, lone wolf.
She was born in the Homestead in 1830 and wrote over 18,000 poems while living here in her 20s and 30s mostly, most of which were never published until after her death. She just liked sharing with her family and friends. I think it's that one down there. That's the one that's saying. The house is currently closed for renovations, and so we were not able to visit inside it.
Destination is on the left.
Right here. Although we were not able to go inside, the Society has posted pictures on their internet site, and here's some pictures of what we would have seen if we had been able to go inside. Next we go to Sturbridge, Massachusetts. Old Sturbridge is a town set in 1830, as life would have been like 50 years after the Revolutionary War here in New England.
Then turn left.
None of the buildings are original here. They have all been moved in, and this is a map of how we'll be going. We'll walk first, and then we'll get on a wagon and we'll ride this area. And then we will walk again as we leave. First we'll look at the Quaker Church. Of course, Deborah has to touch. We decided the fastest and easiest way to get around and to learn more about it is to take the wagon ride, which goes all the way around the area. So let's get on board and listen to our guide.
In the 1830s, there wasn't a store in the United States where you could buy clothes that were already pre-made off of a rack. People had to make all their own clothes.
If your stock caused damage, then you'd have to pay that before you got it out of the pound. And this is a shoe shop. They made tens of thousands of
This
shoes.
building over here to your right is a district schoolhouse. It was brought in from Indiana, New Hampshire, back in Michigan. By the 1830s, most towns were broken up into districts. All the kids in each district, between the ages of 4 and 17, go to the same one-room school. You might have anywhere between 25 and 50 kids in there at one time. We built an updraft model built like this brick reproduction we have on the other side of the road. We loaded that with red ware and heated it up to 1900 degrees to cure it. That first firing gave them such an excess of goods. A couple weeks ago, the week of September 11th, our pottery staff had already loaded down 1,038 pieces of red. We had it stacked on shelves in there, 10 feet high. Closed up that port in front with bricks and mortar, leaving a couple of bricks loose so they could peer in and check the progress of the heats up. Some of our senior staff can actually tell how hot it is by the color of the pottery. It takes on an orange, almost pumpkin-like glow when it gets up towards 1900 degrees. Usually it takes 32, 35 hours, 38 hours.
They raised a lot of pigs, and at 8 months old, they were ready to be slaughtered. They grew rather fast. This was a typical farm in New England in the 1830s, mainly subsistence farming, but they did raise a few things in order to trade so that they could have what they couldn't make themselves.
That building was built in 1810. It was moved here from Bolton, Massachusetts to replace a wooden blacksmith shop that burned down in 1955. The village moved that and disassembled it. When this is in operation, it's powered by this undershot wheel on the back corner. We could lift up that gate to the sluway from inside the mill. The water flows in just below the center line of that wheel. The unbalanced weight of the water in the buckets turns it. That's a little more efficient. That only takes 75 gallons of water a second. Bring it up to 2 horsepower. We can grind up to 4 tons of feed a day. This sawmill over here to your right, actually the 5th sawmill on this site since the 1790s. This one is a copy of the Nickel Colby mill. It was up on Spectacle Pond in Rowan, New Hampshire. The village built this in 1983 and 84. Went to the reproduction because of the stress involved. That takes 300 gallons of water a second. Bring that up to 17 horsepower. In 1830, we're going to be quiet while we enter this covered bridge so you can listen to the horseshoes stretching the planks underneath it. This was a common sound in New England in 1830. The lattice work on each side, what's known as a town lattice truss. It was patented by a gentleman named Ithiel Town. He was born down in Thompson, Connecticut, moved to New Haven, opened up a patent office in New Haven, and eventually became known as one of America's most important architects. When that bridge was first built, it was advertised as being capable of holding up to 30,000 pounds.
And now it's time to say goodbye to our wagon and to start walking a little bit back to the front where we will be leaving from. We head out for our hotel. It's not going to be a very long drive because we're going to be staying in Sturbridge to the Comfort Inn and Suites. And this brings us to the end of day 17.